United States federal courts hear only federal cases. U.S., United States federal courts hear only federal cases. They don't deal with the issues of the states. Federal courts are very limited. This surprises many people. Many people, they hear federal court and they immediately go, ooh, ah, more powerful, bigger, better, special. And none of those things is true. Not at all. In fact, federal courts are far more limited than our state courts. Federal courts only decide a limited range of cases. So first up, conflicting rulings in different states. Now, as I've mentioned before, if it's in red, you don't need to write it down, but I definitely want to talk about this. I won't put any questions on the test about this issue, but it's worthy of discussion. So conflicting rulings in different states. You've got different states all over the country making a variety of different rulings on the same issue. Probably the most recent one that was really big was the whole gay marriage issue that was resolved just a few years ago. Okay, so first off, you've got some states in America saying, gay, straight, who cares? You love each other, you want to get married, have at it. We're happy to help. And then you had some other states going, I don't think we want to quite go there. We'll hit the middle ground here. And we'll go civil union. Yeah, civil union. Not a real legal marriage, but we'll call it a civil union. You can do that. And then you got some states going, gay marriage? Oh, hell no! Next thing you know, they're going to want to start marrying donkeys and goats and stuff like that. Oh, hell no, no gay marriage. So you got people just all over the map, all these states all over the map on the same issue. And a pretty fundamental issue at that, marriage. So finally, the Supreme Court steps in and says, you know what? All of you just shut up. People who love each other can get married, we're done. And that was that. Boom, finished. The federal courts do that. Another thing the federal courts do is resolve cases involving the federal government itself. For example, the 2000 presidential election. Perhaps you remember learning about this in school. Or maybe you're really old like me and you were there. In 2000, we had Al Gore running against George Bush, right? Now, it was a very close election, extremely close. And it came down to the Electoral College votes in the state of Florida, to make a really long story short. Now, we use an Electoral College in the United States instead of using a popular vote system, because if we used a popular vote system, then pretty much all of the people in Los Angeles and parts of California and in New York City and a couple of other big cities would be making the decisions for everybody everywhere. And we say, yeah, no, we don't really want that. So we use an Electoral College, which takes the population of the state and grants a certain number of electoral votes to that state. What this means is during presidential campaigns, the candidates like to visit the states that have large electoral colleges. So you'll see them visiting California, Texas, Florida, Michigan, Illinois, places that have lots of electoral votes. You do not see them visiting North Dakota or Idaho or Montana or Wyoming because there aren't a lot of people there. You know, there's like 10 people and 20 horses. So they focused their campaigning on Florida. And in this particular election, it came right down to Florida and their flawed balloting system. These are called chads. You see those? They're little perforations. These are actually called hanging chads. Now here's what happened with Florida. To the best of my knowledge, if your political science teacher says different, believe them, not me, okay? To the best of my knowledge, okay, you've got your ballot. So you've got the names of all of the people that you're going to choose from, and you've got these little perforated areas here, okay? Now if you want to vote for this person, then you're going to take your pencil or your stylus and you're going to go poke, and you're going to poke out that little square of paper that's perforated. It's supposed to fall completely out and leave a hole. That's what's supposed to happen. And then when you feed it into the vote scanning machine, right, the vote reader, goes, you read it in, and it goes, reek, 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 and it looks for light leaks. And that's how it counts the vote. So wherever there's a hole, it counts that as a vote. You with me so far? Okay, but here's what happened. In the Florida ballots, not all of the perforations were clean, which meant when somebody went to poke one of those out, instead of falling completely out and leaving a hole, it made like a trap door, like what you see here. See how that happens? So what we got is a trap door that doesn't fall out completely, and then when you go to feed it into the machine, reek, 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 it closes the trap door up, and that vote didn't count. So long story made short, Al Gore challenged the vote in the courts. Florida courts said, nope, we're not dealing with this, nope, and it got ugly and messy. And we were actually in limbo for several weeks without even knowing for sure who our president was. Finally, the United States Supreme Court steps in and says, you know what, we're deciding right now, Mr. Bush wins. There it is. Now that's an extremely abbreviated version of what happened. But my point is, the federal courts handle cases involving the federal government itself like that. Does that make sense? Now, neither of these are criminal justice issues, which is why I'm only discussing them and I won't put any test questions on them. But now we're going to move to the parts that are criminal justice issues. Federal courts only decide a limited range of cases such as violations of federal law. Violations of federal law. Who in here can think of an example of a federal law? Okay, go ahead, do it.
Having illegal drugs on you?
Drugs, yeah. All drugs except generally not marijuana, you know, unless you're trafficking across state lines. You mean, you grow the pin-counting paralyzer in your backyard, you know, and you decide to move a few kilos down to Ohio. Okay, because we're crossing state lines, now that becomes federal. But pretty much all of the other drugs, I mean, to make them, you need ingredients. Right? You can't grow the stuff for cocaine here. You can't grow coca plants here. You can't grow opium or poppies very well because, I mean, it's just too dang cold. Meth, all of that stuff, you need ingredients that come from a lot of other places, across state borders, across international lines. So that's what bounces it into the federal jurisdiction. So yeah, drugs, absolutely. Give me another one.
What about criminal sexual conduct?
Nope, the states handle that individually. Yep. Somebody else, give me a guess. It's a good guess. I like guesses. Federal law. Okay.
Any violation of any national geographical park?
Okay, hold that thought. Hold that thought. That's not exactly a law. That's more of a location. So hold that thought. We'll come to that. Yes, sir.
Don't they regulate most gun laws?
Guns, yeah. Wow, you're the second person ever that's come up with that. My other class, for the first time, somebody brought up the guns. Yeah. Violation of federal gun laws. You bet. Good one. Give me another one. Don't hurt yourself.
Human trafficking?
Yes, very good. Human trafficking. That's another new one nobody's ever come up with. I like it. I like it. How about, let me see here. What's that? What is that? That's money, isn't it? Can you make your own? No, you cannot. They get really upset when you do that. I'll tell you a little story. If you promise me you won't ever do this, okay? Don't do this. Don't say you weren't warned. A guy I went to high school with thought he was being real slick, and he took dollar bills and put them, a whole bunch of them on a photocopy machine and photocopied them. Then he took a scissors and cut them up into the appropriate sizes. And then he went to the laundromat and fed them into the dollar bill changer. And for his counterfeit dollar bills, he got 4 real quarters for each of them. Yeah, he thought he was so smooth. He was so smart, don't you know? And he went back and did it a few times. And then one day, hello, Federal Secret Service, we would like to talk to you, sir, about your counterfeit money. Now, because he was still in high school, they marked it off as stupidity, what we call youthful indiscretion. And I mean, he went to court. He went to federal court. He had broken federal law. He went to federal court. But because of all of the mitigating circumstances, the circumstances that made his crime less severe, like being young and stupid, they gave him federal probation. So if you violate a federal law, you go to federal court, and you could go to federal prison, or you could get federal probation, right? Just the same as the state, except it's under federal law. You with me? Does that make sense? Yeah. What else? Give me another federal law. Don't do that, right? No making your own money. Another federal law.
Counterfeit IDs.
Actually not. Actually not. How about 9/11? What's that one? Terrorism. Yeah, terrorism. All right, one more. Oh. What? Murder is not. No, it's not. Fraud is not. All right, let me throw a few up here. So we're going to be talking about offenses specifically addressed by federal law. Right? Offenses that are specifically addressed by the federal body of law, such as terrorism. And piracy. Right? You know, on your videos, your music downloads, your computer software, all of that has that piracy warning on it. Kidnapping, civil rights violations, counterfeiting, tax evasion, insider trading. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. This is specifically a federal body of law, okay? Yes, ma'am? You know, somebody asked me that in the other class, and I'm sorry that I don't have an accurate response for that. I don't know. It just is. Yeah, so it's just the way it is, I guess. Well, you guys are on it this semester. I like it. Okay, so offenses specifically addressed by federal law, or what Madison was alluding to a few minutes ago, offenses committed in federal jurisdiction. So this is a specific body of law. Here we're looking at any offense, but it just happens to be committed in an area of federal jurisdiction. Who could give me an example of an area of federal jurisdiction?
DC.
All right, D.C. Washington, D.C. certainly is. Very good. Give me another one.
National Forest.
All right, national forests and parks. Okay. What else did I hear out there?
Guam.
Well, actually, it's just a territory. I don't know if it's under federal. I couldn't say for that one, on that for sure. I've never heard that one before. Give me another one. Common one. Another area of federal jurisdiction.
Borders.
Borders, yeah. Absolutely, borders. Good. Give me another one.
Military zones?
Military installations. Another one. There's one not very far from here. Maybe you go there sometimes and throw your money away.
Casino.
What? Where?
Casinos.
Well, not the casino, but what is the casino
Native Reserve.
located on?
Oh, the reservation.
The reservation, right? Indian reservations. Right? So you're getting the idea here. So let me throw up some examples here. Banks. All right, wait, let me stop right there. Why is a bank an area of federal jurisdiction? What? Well, 7-Eleven has money too, but if you rob a 7-Eleven, it's not a federal offense. But if you rob a bank, it is. Why is it a federal building?
Banks are backed by federal funding.
All right, it's federally insured, FDIC. Your money is federally insured. So if a bank robber comes in and steals your money from that bank, the federal government says, oh, well, as long as it's no more than $250,000 that's insured, we're very sorry, ma'am, here's your money back. So the bank robber has in actuality stolen from the federal government, right? If they're going to replace your money. We've got the post office. Anything having to do with the post office or the U.S. mail, up to and including rural students, mailbox baseball. You don't be doing that.
You can't put mail in somebody else's mailbox, can you?
No, you're not supposed to. Mailbox baseball, for those of you that have not engaged in that, and never will, is where one person is driving down a rural road and other persons, hang out with a baseball bat and swing and hit mailboxes and knock them off their posts. And there's a scoring system. Don't do that, okay? Don't do that. That's mailbox baseball.
I have a question. Because I know,
Don't do it.
anyway, because I know like Bay City's courthouse is considered a federal building. Would all courthouses be considered one?
Bay City Courthouse is not, but there is a federal courthouse located on the upper floors of the Postal Service building. Yep, there's a federal courthouse there. So that is federal.
So all courthouses would be considered, would it all?
No, all federal courthouses would be. State courthouses fall under state law, right? Federal, state, completely separate. Apple, orange, apple, orange. Yeah. National parks and forests. Airports, right? Those TSA people that want to go through all your stuff. Indian reservations, military bases, federal buildings. So those are just some examples. Now the question was earlier, why isn't murder a federal offense? Well, it's just not. It falls under state law, and the states deal with that individually unless you commit murder in an area of federal jurisdiction. You commit a murder in a bank, or a post office, or in a national park, or in an airport, a reservation, or you assault a federal employee, right, or murder a federal employee like that. Now it turns federal. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So violations of federal laws are offenses specifically addressed by federal law or offenses committed in federal jurisdiction. And if you do that, you wind up in the federal court system. Federal courts have limited jurisdiction and decide many fewer cases than state courts. Because they're limited, they have less to do. So federal courts are not special. I really, really want to remove that idea from your head today. Federal courts are not special. There's nothing special about them at all. Federal laws are not special. You hear people go, "Oh, you broke a federal law!" BFD. Right? You break a federal law, you go to federal court. If you're convicted, you go to federal prison. Now some people say, "Oh, federal prison, well that's a much nicer prison system." No, it's not. Every prison system has its good prisons. Every prison system has its toilets. And believe me when I say that there are plenty of toilety kind of facilities in the federal prison system. And they're just not nice places. So don't think for a minute, oh, there's a club fed. No, it's not. There are some really, really bad federal prisons. Just a different body of law. You with me? So federal courts are not special. Federal laws are not special. Federal crimes are not special. Ooh, you committed a federal crime. Ooh, yeah. PFD.
So if you commit a federal crime and you say you go to prison for a long time, can they move you from states, or does it have to be?
Well, you're in the federal system, so they can move you into any federal prison that they see fit.
Okay.
But it would be a federal prison. Owned and operated by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So none of these are special. They're not bigger. They're not better. They're not badder. They're not more powerful. They're not more anything. They're just different. Apple, orange. Federal criminals are not special either. So to really drive my point home, I'm going to tell you a little story, and I'm going to introduce you to the federal criminal in my family. Yep. This is our federal criminal. I'm not joking. She assaulted the mailman. She did. She assaulted the mailman. Now here's how this happened. Okay, she's a very sweet girl. We have a house with an enclosed front porch, and this used to be the mail slot that we used. The beware of the cat sign went up later, after the story happened that I'm about to tell you. But the mail slot was there, and we liked to use our mail slot because, you know, when you go out of town, we didn't have to stop our mail. The postman could just continue to shove the mail through the mail slot. I mean, you'd have to be gone an awfully long time to fill up an entire enclosed front porch on a house. So it was very convenient for us, and it was also convenient for the mail carrier. So we used this mail slot for years. And the wall was especially thick there, and there was a little chute that slanted down. And the mail slot squeaked. So my little criminal cat, isn't she cute? She would hear the squeak of the mail slot go up, and she would run out and sit and wait to watch the mail spill through. She loved to watch the mail spill through. It was the highlight of her little day. So this had been going on for like years. One day we have a substitute mail carrier on the route, not our regular guy, a substitute. And what happened is a matter of conjecture, a little bit of a he said, she said. But you know, I think using some basic inductive, deductive reasoning, we can figure out what really happened. Now, the substitute mail carrier side of the story was he opened the slot and he put the mail in and it got stuck. And so he reached in and pushed it down and the cat attacked him. Yep, that's his story. In order for him to get attacked by the cat, now remember, I said the wall is really thick there? We measured it. He would have had to have had his arm in that mail slot all the way up to the elbow. So what we think happened is that he opened up the slot and he saw the cute little kitty and he reached his arm in there and teased the kitty and he got exactly what he had coming. So the mail carrier, goes crying to the neighbor who gets him a Band-Aid and later tells me that there was a situation. So I'm thinking, uh-oh. Sure enough, the next day I get a letter in the mail from the Postmaster General telling me that my mail is basically being held hostage until I come in and talk to the mail carrier supervisor about replacing my mail slot with an actual mailbox, okay? Now, I don't want to do this. Plus, you know, it's going to ruin my baby's perfect day. We don't want to remove our mail slot. We don't want to use a mailbox, right? Because it's just more convenient to have the mail slot. So what we did do is we covered the access. We took a box and put it over the front and we wired it shut so the cat no longer has access to the mail slot. Right? We've already rained on our parade, I know. We took photographs of it. I go and meet with the supervisor. Now mind you, this is in December, towards the end of the semester, so I'm busier than a one-legged man in a butt-kicking contest already. I don't have a lot of spare time. Add to that my mail is being held hostage in December. So all of the Christmas cards that you get in December, I'm not getting them. All of the stuff that I've ordered online to give as gifts to friends and relatives, I'm not getting it. See the problem here. So I go down, I talk to the supervisor, and she was very nice, very polite. I explained the situation. I showed her the photograph of what we had done, and she said, yeah, she said, that looks like that'll work just fine. I would love to work with you. I would love to tell you that you can keep your mail slot and not put a mailbox in, but union contract work rules say that if a mail carrier requests that a mailbox be put in, we have to make you do it. Now, I'm not happy. So I'm polite. I say, may I get the name of your supervisor? So she gives me the name of the supervisor. I contact the supervisor. We make an appointment for the next week. My mail is still being held hostage. I'm not getting my bills or anything now either. I meet with that mail carrier. We go through the same rigmarole. I show the pictures. He's polite. He says, yes, that would probably work, but the union work rules. I said, I would like to see those. He was waiting for me. Here you go, ma'am. And he highlighted the area too. Who is your supervisor, sir? So I get on the phone, I make another appointment for a few more days later. I come in and I see the supervisor. And I tell the same story. I say, we want to keep our mail slot. He said, I'm sorry, I wish I could help you. I understand, but work rules are work rules. And you know, you have to put in a mailbox. I said, but I don't want a mailbox. Who is your supervisor? He says, no, you don't understand. I'm it. The buck stops here. There is nowhere else you can go. And I'm telling you right now that you have to put in a mailbox. All right, so I'm a little ticked off. I said, and where do you propose in the middle of December I get a mailbox? Oh, well, I hadn't thought of that, he says. So he goes back in the storeroom, grabs a mailbox, still in the box. Here you go. Great. Awesome. And sir, it's December. The ground is frozen. How do you propose that I put in said mailbox? Oh. Well, you know what? Give me that back. I'll send a guy over tomorrow and we'll do it for you. So they did. They put in a mailbox. All right, so now we can't use the mail slot anymore. We got to use the mailbox. I'm not happy, but it is what it is, right? I'm thinking this is all done. A couple more days go by. You know, I've got my mail. A couple more days go by, I get on the door. Open the door, animal control is there. Ma'am, we've received a complaint from the United States Post Office that your cat has assaulted a federal employee. We are required to inspect the cat for disease and to look at your vaccination records to make sure that your animal is not rabid. Alrighty then. I know, right? I says, well, let me get the records first. So I show him the vaccination records. Okay, well, that's all in order. Now, meanwhile, understand our cats are our kids, and our house looks like PetSmart most of the time. So we've got cat trees and cat toys and stuff all over the place. We've got several cat trees on the enclosed front porch. In one of the cat trees is my other more docile cat, lying on her back with all 4 feet up going, pet my belly. So, the animal control guy looks and he's petting her belly. Oh, this is the criminal cat. She's so precious. I'm like, no, that's not the criminal cat. I couldn't be that lucky. The criminal cat is timid and runs and hides when she hears doorbells and knocks on the door. So I know she's under the bed. The criminal cat also does not like to be handled or picked up. And now I need to go get her. Long story made short, let's just say when I came out with the criminal cat to show her to the animal control guy, we were about that far from needing to call 911 and getting me a blood transfusion. I was far more scratched up than that whiny mail carrier ever thought about being. So, okay, the animal control guy is satisfied. Then he looks down and he says, ma'am, my records here show that these cats do not have licenses. Yes, sir, that would be correct. These cats do not have licenses. You're correct. Yep. Ma'am, did you know that that's a $100 ticket? No, I didn't know that. He laughs. He was a nice guy. He says, well, I'll tell you what. If you will go down to animal control and purchase the licenses and pay the late fee, then we could forget about the ticket if you would do that this week. I'm like, okay, I would do that. Thank you very much. So he leaves. I take care of that. I'm thinking it's all done, right? I'm thinking it's over. Oh, no. I get a formal letter from the United States Postal Service basically declaring my cat as a federal criminal and telling me that if she ever attacks another mailman, death penalty, baby. I got to put her down. I know, right? It's funny now. It wasn't very funny back then. It's funny now. And the point I'm trying to make by telling you this story is that when people say federal, bigger, better, more powerful, special, no, it's not. It's not. If you go camping in a federal forest without a permit, that's a federal misdemeanor. It's just a different body of law. It's just a different court system. Does that make sense? Okay. Well then, what's that?
What's the cat's name?
Moira. It means fate. Let's go back to the 3 tiers of our court system. Okay, so you've got this diagram here. We've got the trial courts, the Court of Appeals, the Supreme Court, okay? So we're going to come over here. We're in the federal courts. We're going to talk about the 3 tiers of the federal criminal courts and what each tier is specifically named. Because each of these tiers has a specific name for the federal court system. Trial courts of original jurisdiction. Right down here, trial courts of original jurisdiction, where the trials happen. In the federal court system, these are called U.S. district courts. U.S. district courts. You know that it is a federal court we refer to because of the designation U.S. or United States in front. If it were a state court, it would not have U.S. in front of it. So you know automatically U.S. District Court, federal. There are 94 districts in the country. Now, since we only have 50 states, it would be reasonable to presume that with 94 districts, some states must have more than one district, right? And if you thought that, you would be correct. There is at least one district in each state, but it's based on population. So more populated states have more districts. So very lightly populated states, like Colorado, Montana, Idaho, North and South Dakota, they only have one district. But very populated states, California, Texas, Florida, many other states, They have more than one district. Let's look at our geographic boundaries map. You have this in your course pack, but you don't have the nice colored version. We're going to ignore the big black numbers for a minute here, and we're just going to look at the individual states. Look at Texas, and you will see that Texas has 4 districts, because there's a lot of people in Texas. It's a big state. So we have the northern, the western, the southern, and the eastern district. We go out to California, which also has an awful lot of people. We've got the southern district, we've got the central district, we've got the northern district, and the eastern district. If we come over here to, well, there's Florida. Let's look at Florida. Southern, middle, northern. Tennessee, western, middle, eastern. But look out here at these states that are sparsely populated, right, and they just have the one district. Let's swing over to Michigan. Michigan has 2 districts. We have the eastern district in the lower part of the Mitt, on the eastern side, which is the most populated. We have the western district on the western side of the Mitt, which is a little bit less populated, and the UP and all 10 people that live there. So more population, more districts. A district may have multiple places of holding court. And that only makes sense. Imagine if you're in the state of Montana. That's where I grew up. You're in the state of Montana. It's a big freaking state. I think it takes like 16 hours to drive from one side all the way across to the other side. It's huge. So can you imagine if there was just one courthouse in the state of Montana? How awful that would be to everybody that didn't live in that city? How unfair that would be? That's kind of like not equal justice. So what we find is a district is going to have multiple courthouses to accommodate the needs of as many people as possible. Like Michigan, for example, we're in the eastern district over here. We have 5 courthouses in our eastern district. You have this handout, United States District Court, Eastern District of Michigan. There's one in Detroit. I bet you guessed that. There is also one in Ann Arbor. There's one in Bay City, which is upstairs of the post office. There is one in Flint, and there is one in Port Huron. So for the bulk of the population in the lower half of the eastern part of the state, it's pretty easy to find a courthouse that doesn't involve a lot of unnecessary driving. Now, unfortunately, if you were way up to Sheboygan or Alpena or someplace like that, Bay City is as close as it gets. You know, that kind of sucks to be you. So, you know, I suppose if you live up north, you probably don't want to commit federal offenses, right? Our next tier. Are we okay with the U.S. District Courts? You guys solid on that? Okay. So our next tier, see where we are here? Court of Appeals, otherwise known as appellate courts. The name in the federal system is the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals or United States Circuit Court of Appeals. Sometimes you will hear this court called the U.S. Circuit Court. Sometimes you may hear this court called the U.S. Court of Appeals. However, I would urge you to remember its complete full name, the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, right? Its complete full name, you know, like the name its mother calls it when she's mad. You know how that goes. U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, its complete full name. This way, you will not confuse it with a Michigan court that has a similar name, and you will always remember specifically what it does if you remember U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. There are 13 appellate courts, 13. Each in a different area called a circuit. Now, you don't have to write the red stuff down. Each in a different area called a circuit, with jurisdiction only within their own geographic boundaries. So the name circuit court actually goes way back to the 1800s, when federal judges used to ride from courthouse to courthouse in a circuit dispensing justice. And the name just kind of stuck for whatever reason. With jurisdiction only within their own geographic boundaries. Now let me explain what I mean by that. Let's look back at our map again. Now we will look at the big black numbers. These are circuits, right? This is the 9th Circuit here, Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon. California, Nevada, and Arizona is the Ninth Circuit. The 10th Circuit, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico. That's the 10th Circuit. We are the 6th Circuit. Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Are you with me so far? Let's say that we have a defendant, we'll call him Danny the drug dealer. Danny the drug dealer was convicted by trial in the Eastern District of Michigan. Danny the drug dealer believes that an error of law was made in his case. He believes that evidence was used to convict him wrongfully, that evidence was wrongfully admitted and should have been disallowed by the judge. So Danny the drug dealer says, there has been a mistake made in the law, in the application of the law in my case, and I would like to appeal. Now, Danny the drug dealer can't say, well, I would like to appeal, but I would like to appeal to the 11th Circuit because it's much warmer down there. And, you know, hey, it's February. No. Because Danny the drug dealer is from Michigan, he must make his appeal to the 6th Circuit, because that is the geographic boundaries of the 6th Circuit. So instead of going to Florida, he's going to be going to balmy Cincinnati. Does that make sense? U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, its complete full name. Here's how this works. After losing a case in the lower court, in this case, the U.S. District Court. After losing a case in the U.S. District Court, a person may appeal. So we'll go back to Danny the drug dealer, okay? Now, Danny the drug dealer can't just go, I don't want to go to prison. No. There has to be an actual error of law that he is alleging. He has to say, no, this was done wrong. The law was applied incorrectly in my case, and U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, I would like you to look for this error that I'm alleging. So you have to have the alleged error of law. And secondly, you have to have been convicted by trial. There are two ways to get convicted. We're not there yet in our process, and we'll talk about this later. But you can get convicted by trial, or more commonly, by plea bargain. Does anybody here know what a plea bargain is?
A deal.
A deal? What kind of a deal?
They offer it to you.
Who's they?
The authorities.
The prosecutor. Okay, the prosecutor offers some sort of a deal to the accused person that will result in perhaps a lesser charge, which, of course means a lesser sentence, or just a lesser sentence, in exchange for a guilty plea to that crime. So the person is agreeing to say guilty for some sort of concession or leniency from the prosecution. Does that make sense? So here's the thing. Once that person says guilty, once guilty comes out of their mouth, where's the error? They just said they were guilty. There can't be an error of law in an admission of guilt. Therefore, the only error that there could be made would be in a trial. Yes, ma'am?
If they said not guilty and then were...
Well, then they would get a trial.
Evidence like that they did do it, would they get the higher sentence?
Well, if they pled not guilty, which we'll learn later on, not today, but if they pled not guilty, then they would go to trial. So it has to be an alleged error of law. It has to be based on trial. A panel of 3 judges reviews the case for errors of law. It is not a new trial. Appeals courts do not have trials, right? Where are trials held? Only? What kind of a court is that?
Trial?
A trial court of original jurisdiction. That is the only place trials are held. A trial court of original jurisdiction will have trials. Appeals courts do not. Yes, ma'am?
So if all 3 of those judges say yes, this was wrong in the case, do they go back to trial?
She's splashing in the pool. She's running ahead. That's exactly where I'm going next.
Okay.
And I am necessarily leaving a lot of detail out because we could be here for the entire semester just talking about court processes. So I'm truncating some things necessarily. because for an intro class, it's just not necessary that you know all the details. So upon review, the court has several options. Upon review, the court may affirm. It agrees with the lower court's decision. So in this case, the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals would say, trial court of original jurisdiction, U.S. District Court, good job. We find no error of law, and we will affirm your ruling. You did right. Awesome. Good job. High five. Most cases are affirmed. Because as it turns out, you know, the courts are reasonably good at what they do, and so are the judges. So most cases are affirmed. A second option would be to modify, to change the decision without completely reversing it. We'll call it a judicial tweak, okay? We're going to get the judicial wrench out of the judicial toolbox, and we're going to go, reek, 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 and we're just going to tweak it up a little bit. Right, there was something that wasn't quite right here.
How can that affect the case?
Eager beaver. So this is the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals saying, trial court of original jurisdiction, U.S. District Court, you did pretty good here, pretty good. But there's just this little thing here that we need to fix. We're going to make this adjustment here. Reek, reek, reek. Now, any adjusting can only help the person making the appeal. It can't harm them. It can only help them. So it's a good thing. A modify is a good thing. So by way of example, maybe there was a sentencing issue, and the judge sentenced the person to more time than they should have had. And so the Court of Appeal says, they came close, but we're going to knock off a couple of years. We're just going to tweak that a little bit. And then we have reverse. Reverse. Oh my. To disagree with the lower court's ruling and dismiss the case. This would be the United States Circuit Court of Appeals saying, trial court of original jurisdiction, U.S. District Court, oh my freaking God! What were you thinking when you made this ruling? Were you stoned or stupid? Were you asleep on the switch? What? Whack! No, bad. This is horrible. This is so awful, it's beyond redemption. We're just going to throw it out like yesterday's trash. It's gone. It's out of here. Which means the person that made the appeal walks free. Wow, can you imagine being the judge that made that ruling? How embarrassing would that be? Talk about egg on your face. Now, in your course pack, under your courtroom experience assignment, you have 2 sample papers. One for district court, one for circuit court. In your district court paper, I talk about a case that was reversed in the 6th Circuit. It was a drug case, and it's a pretty interesting case. So read that. I mean, you should read that anyway. You should read the sample papers anyway. But read it, because it's an interesting story. Reversals are extremely rare. Because mostly, you know, the courts do what they're supposed to do. The last one is a remand. Remand. To send the case back to the lower court for further review or even a new trial. Even a new trial. This is called a trial de novo, more Latin. A trial de novo or new trial. Remand. Send the case back to the lower court for further review or a new trial. Trial de novo. This would be the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals saying, trial court of original jurisdiction, U.S. District Court, you must have been asleep at the switch on this one. I don't even know what to make of this. This is bad. This is just bad. It's not so bad that we're going to throw it out. It's not that bad. But it's bad enough that we are going to send this case back to you for a do-over. And hey, trial court, do you think you could get it right this time? So still not a good thing. Now, if you're a bad guy, your best bet, of course, would be reversal, right? If you're Danny the drug dealer, you want a reversal because they're going to throw the case out and you walk. If you can't get a reversal, probably the next best thing is going to be the remand, because now you got a complete do-over, and hey, with a new trial, you could have a different verdict, right? Yes, sir.
If they have a retrial though, could he get a more?
He
more
could.
severe sentence?
Yeah, you're rolling the dice.
Okay.
If you're rolling the dice. But remember, he's alleging there was an error of law and that evidence shouldn't be allowed. So in a retrial, the evidence wouldn't be allowed in. So, you know, I mean, you're rolling the dice anytime you take a case to trial, but in probability, it would be a good thing. Does that make sense? Affirm, modify, reverse, remand. Affirm, modify, reverse, remand. So if you saw, let's say, multiple choice questions about those things, you would be able to make a distinction between what those are? What each of those are? Okay, all right. It's called a clue. Called a clue. What's that?
Do you get a new jury and remand?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Whole new trial. Yeah, the question was, do you get a new jury in a remand? Yes, you do. It's a completely new trial. So we've got the trial courts of original jurisdiction, U.S. district courts. We've got the federal appeals courts, the U.S. Circuit Courts of Appeal. And then we have Supreme Court. Just right at the top there. Supreme Court. At the federal level, the Supreme Court is called the U.S. Supreme Court. Again, the U.S. denoting that it is federal. U.S. Supreme Court. And there it is. It's a glorious place. If you ever get to D.C., I would recommend that you go see it. The U.S. Supreme Court is the highest court in the nation. It is often called the court of last resort. Because if your appeal doesn't get heard in the Circuit Court of Appeals, you make one last appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, and if they don't hear it or if they rule against you, you're done. You're dead in the water. It's over. Game over. So court of last resort. If it doesn't happen here, it's not going to happen. The Supreme Court does not have trials. Trials only happen in one place. Where is that one place that trials happen only?
Original jurisdiction.
Trial courts of original jurisdiction. Not appeals courts, not Supreme Courts. So the Supreme Court, just like the United States Circuit Court of Appeals, reviews cases for errors of law. It is not a new trial. This is why they also do not make TV shows about the Supreme Court, because it would be... The United States Supreme Court establishes precedents. Remember that word precedent? Establishes precedents that all courts must follow. All courts, every court in the nation. What's a precedent again? A standard or a rule that must be followed from this point on by all courts, every single court. The United States Supreme Court gets literally thousands and thousands of appeals every year. But it doesn't hear them all. In fact, it doesn't hear hardly any of them compared to how many it gets. It only hears cases of special constitutional value. The court deems the case to be of special constitutional interest, and they look at roughly about 100 cases a year out of all of the thousands that they get. And even if a case might have some constitutional value, they might decide that they don't want to deal with it because it's, a hot potato issue. That's why it took so long to get that whole gay marriage issue resolved, because for years the Supreme Court was going, yeah, we're not going there, hot potato. Let's not go there. That's politically unsound right now. Nope, hot potato. We're not going there. Until finally somebody got some moxie and said, let's do this. So, here's the abbreviated version kind of how this works. How many Supreme Court justices are there first? 9. Right, there are 9. Now, don't take this to the bank, and if your political science teacher says different, they're right. But I'm going to go with each of those U.S. Supreme Court justices has 3 law clerks. I think it's 3. Don't take it to the bank, but I think it's 3. For our purposes today, it's 3. Every year, each Supreme Court justice gets to handpick their law clerks. Now, the term law clerk is a little deceiving, because when we hear the word clerk, you think of somebody doing mundane, menial, writing, typing, filing kind of stuff. And nothing could be further from the truth. A law clerk is somebody who has a law degree, and instead of practicing law in the courtroom, they choose to practice law by doing legal research. That's what a law clerk does. Okay? So these U.S. Supreme Court justices every year can pick 3 new law clerks. So where do you think they're going to go? Well, they're going to go to the very best law schools in the nation. So they go to the top law schools in the nation, and who do you think they pick? The guy that graduated last in his class? No. They're picking the top scholars from the finest law schools in the nation. So these are brilliant legal minds. And they say, I would like you to clerk for me for a year. Can you imagine putting that in your resume? I mean, not only have you graduated top in your class from one of the best law schools in the nation, now you've gotten the experience of clerking for a U.S. Supreme Court justice? Oh, yeah, let's start me at about $1 million, please. And those people can just about write their own tickets, and they often go on to become judges themselves. So let's say that all of these appeals are pouring in. And they divvy up the appeals to all of these law clerks for each of the Supreme Court justices. And let's say we have Justice Sotomayor and her 3 law clerks. And they have this big pile of appeals that have come in. So each of those law clerks is going to go something like, look through them, right? And each of those law clerks is expected to know the mind of their justice, how their justice thinks and feels about certain issues. So each law clerk goes through their little pile, and they go, no, my justice would not want to see that case. And it's done. It's over. Adios. Dead in the water. No, my justice wouldn't want to see that case either. That's out. Well, look at this. My justice might want to see this case. We're going to put this in the yes pile. No, she wouldn't want to see this case either. Oh, well, look at here. She might want to see this one. So, all said and done, all 3 of the law clerks have their own little yes piles. And then they meet together. And they winnow it all down, yes, no, until they have a single pile of yes. They brief the cases. They present them to Her Honor. Justice Sotomayor looks at them. She goes, wow, this is really good. This is exactly the kind of case that I would be interested in hearing. Yeah, my law clerks are right on. Excellent. Yeah, it's a pretty good case here, too. I'll look at this later in a little bit more detail. But yeah, I think I'm interested in that one. What? Were they smoking dope last night when they wrote this up? Oh, my God, no, I don't want to look at that. And each justice does the same thing. They do a sort until they get a yes pile. And then all 9 justices meet together and they do another sort until they have a yes pile. So you can kind of see that getting your case heard by the U.S. Supreme Court is about like a snowball's chance in hell. And why they only hear about 100 cases per year. As the ultimate or supreme kind of appeals court, because that is essentially what it is, isn't it? It's reviewing cases for errors of law, which makes it a kind of appeals court. It's the supreme appeals court. As the ultimate or supreme kind of appeals court, just like the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, it can do 4 things. It can affirm, which means what? Agree, yes, agree with the lower court. Yep, lower court, you're good, high five. It can modify, which is what? Yeah, change slightly without totally reversing it. We're going to just tweak it a little bit. There we go. All right, cool. Reverse, what's that? Throw it out. Yesterday's garbage. Blah. It's awful. Get it out of here. It stinks. And remand, what's that? Send it back for a do-over. So affirm, modify, reverse, remand, right? This is the current Supreme Court as of November 30th, 2018. That is Justice Kavanaugh, who all the controversy was about last summer. He was confirmed. So all the justices are nominated by the president, confirmed by the Senate. Right? You know that from political science, of course. Nominated by the president, confirmed by the Senate. Now, the reason I'm going to talk about this is because I want you to understand that when you elect a president, you are actually directly voting for your Supreme Court, too. And let me tell you how this works. Because a president will nominate justices if there are vacancies. You got to believe that the president is going to choose justices that are like-minded. So a conservative president is going to nominate conservative justices, wouldn't you think? And a liberal president is probably going to nominate liberal justices, yes? So we look at Obama's nominations. We've got Justice Sotomayor and Justice Kagan there, both liberal justices. Now here's the thing. Even though President Obama is out of office and can never be president again, all of these judges have lifetime tenure. They can never be fired. They can never be dismissed. They have those jobs for as long as they want them. So even though President Obama is gone, his legacy lives on in the form of these two justices here, who will continue to make decisions that are reflective of President Obama and his policies and philosophies. Does that make sense? Now, President Trump is president, and he has been able to nominate and get appointed two justices, right? Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. Okay. I want you to take a look at these justices. Now, the whole back row here, they look old to you because you're young. But for Supreme Court justices, they're relatively young. They're probably in their early 60s. In fact, I think Kavanaugh there is probably in his late 50s. Okay, which for a Supreme Court justice is pretty young. And then we have Justice Roberts, same thing, he's probably in his early 60s. But look at these other four justices. They're pretty freaking old, would you agree? Okay, so here's the issue. Right now, the Supreme Court composition is not a lot different from what it was before. We used to have 4 liberals, 4 conservatives, and 1 swing vote. And we lost our swing vote, so now it's a little bit more to the conservative side, but it's not hardcore, hard right conservative, okay? But what happens if President Trump is able to nominate yet another justice? What happens if Ruth Bader Ginsburg keels over? Because she could. I think she's pushing 90.
Yes.
If she keels over, or if somebody else decides to retire, that creates a vacancy. Right? And if it's during Donald Trump's tenure, he's going to nominate a new justice that is going to be conservative like him. And now the Supreme Court, for the foreseeable future, for the next 10, 15, 20 years, maybe more, is going to have a decidedly conservative bent. Do you see how that works? That's why it's so important to consider all of this stuff when you're voting for a president. Because whoever you vote for as president directly affects that Supreme Court. Does that make sense? So it's pretty important to vote, would you agree? So you're going to show me voter registration cards and get 5 bonus points? Yes, sir.
Could you see if Trump gets reelected for a second term, at least getting 2 more justices appointed?
It's foreseeable. When you look at the age of some of these judges here, and she's not in very good health either.
She going pro.
Yeah.
What about the far left? How old is that guy?
What's that?
Far left. How old is he?
Oh, he's in his 80s too. I think that's Justice Breyer. He's in his 80s too. So yeah, it's foreseeable.
He don't look 80.
So let's go back, our 3 tiers, just like the one that you have in your course pack. So we've got the trial courts, the appeals courts, and the Supreme Courts. So in the federal system, trial courts of original jurisdiction are called what?
Trial court district.
U.S. District Courts. U.S. District Courts. Appeals courts in the federal court system are called what?
U.S. Circuit.
U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. Good. And Supreme Court is called?
U.S. Supreme Court.
U.S. Supreme Court. Okay? So you would be able to recognize those on, I don't know, maybe multiple choice questions?